Welcome to another tutorial special. This presentation is designed primarily for network defenders, but may also appeal to business leaders who need to know more about what ransomware is, how it spreads, and what mitigation strategies you can employ to avoid becoming a victim. The presentation also touches on what to do if you are currently suffering from a ransomware attack. Okay, so first and foremost, there are two key types of ransomware. There is locker ransomware, which stops you accessing your computer by locking your desktop. Although unpleasant, potentially this is much easier to fix than crypto ransomware, which is our second type of infection. Crypto ransomware is used by cybercriminals to encrypt or scramble an organization's data with a key, so it's no longer readable. The key is just a mathematical algorithm that takes your data and turns it into useless gobbledygook. This type of ransomware affects servers, mobile devices, and any additional storage device that is attached to the infected machine, such as USB sticks or SD cards or external hard drives. To add insult to injury, some of these ransomware attacks include a countdown timer to prevent the user trying to develop a solution and to induce panic. This means that you're faced with paying a hefty ransom or losing your data permanently. Okay, so the next big question is, what are the chances of me being hit? Or in other words, what is the scale of the problem? Credible statistics can be hard to come by, but according to Barracuda, 47% of UK businesses have been affected by ransomware attacks at some stage. And according to Cybersecurity Venture, ransomware attacks will occur every 11 seconds by 2021. Sophos also recently reported that 73% of the organizations they spoke to said that the cybercriminal had actually succeeded in encrypting company data. In order to keep their identity secret, many cybercriminals will demand payment in cryptocurrency, which can be thought of as electronic money. Such transactions are almost impossible to trace, making it very difficult to pursue the attacker via the payments being made. Ransomware is expensive. There can be considerable damage to the reputation of an organization affected by it, especially if disclosure is not handled in a timely or transparent manner. This can make it difficult to retain existing clients and generate future business. On top of this, there are financial losses to consider because of business interruptions. You can't continue to operate when you have no data. And the average downtime, according to some studies, is 16 days and rising fast. We also have to bear in mind that even when the incident is considered resolved, many companies are still operating with a lot less data than they had previously. And of course, there is the cost of dealing with the incident itself. Generally speaking, many medium-sized organizations have to bring in a security professional, and that kind of advice and expertise comes at a premium. Finally, the ransomware attack may disguise other offences that the cybercriminal has already or will commit. Potentially, they could have been sat on your systems for months, quietly harvesting sensitive information to be used in other forms of attacks or to be sold on the dark web. This can sometimes lead to litigation and fines from the exposure of regulated data. So the first question that pops in my mind is, well, can I not just pay the ransomware? You could, but consider the following points. What type of criminal organization are you funding by paying their demand? Secondly, insurance companies that offer cyber insurance will not usually reimburse such expenditures given that it's ethically suspect. Thirdly, what guarantees have you that the encryption process has not permanently corrupted your files? Or how do you know that the attacker will even bother to provide you with the decryption key once you've paid, or that they haven't already installed other malware and exploit kits on your system, or that they won't steal your data for other criminal purposes, or to extort more payments in the future? Hopefully this has encouraged you to stay with us. Perhaps one of the most important delivery mechanisms of ransomware involves the use of social engineering. The aim here is to trick an unsuspecting user into installing the malware. Frequently, this involves the use of phishing emails. Research conducted by IBM in 2017 concluded that 59% of all ransomware attacks come from phishing emails, and 91% of all malware is delivered via email systems. So the big question is why, and the answer is pretty obvious. Phishing emails can look extremely convincing. They can appear to be from a legitimate source, they contain information that seems to make perfect sense, and they can be well formatted and grammatically accurate. These emails will often contain a malicious attachment that facilitates the download of ransomware onto the victim's system. Alternatively, the email may contain a link that encourages the user to visit an infected website, and the download will occur there. It is also common for malicious actors to somehow get physical access to a system. This might involve blagging or piggybacking their way past security. The former is about telling huge whoppers to get you into the building, and the latter is about following authorized personnel through secure access points, often relying on the politeness of others to open doors for you. Alternatively, it might rely on baiting, such as dropping a malicious USB on the floor, which hopefully somebody will pick up and plug in. The USB will then facilitate the installation of the ransomware. Another effective delivery mechanism of ransomware is via malvertising. Malvertising, or malicious advertising, is when an attacker will purchase ad space on a legitimate advertising platform in order to place an infected ad. This ad usually redirects a user to a site that will scan the computer for vulnerabilities. Perhaps, for example, your browser is out of date or your operating system is out of date. The site will also determine whether your machine meets the hacker's requirements. For example, is it Windows-based? Is it in the country the attacker wants to focus on? If the system is vulnerable and within the scope of the attack, the site will then download malware onto the machine. This gives the hacker a foothold onto it, whereupon they can download ransomware or just do something bad. Here at EMSU, we see a lot of attackers gaining entry to a victim's system through RDP. So what is RDP? If I work as a system administrator, I may need to access your computer or your network. But how do I do this when I work from home or I'm on the road? This is a problem that the Remote Desktop Protocol, or RDP, was designed to fix. RDP means you can log into a system from anywhere and everywhere. Your desktop then looks and feels like you're actually on site and logged in, ready to go. Unfortunately, RDP and equivalent products have suffered a few security bugs, and the passwords that some people use to log into RDP have been pretty awful. If this is the case, RDP can give an attacker convenient access to your network, and if they have administrator privileges, they can do some serious damage, including the delivery of ransomware. System administrators, IT support, and even managed service providers who businesses pay to look after their networks need to lock down RDP services. Another delivery mechanism is macros. A macro is a mini program that makes Microsoft Office documents fantastic. When you click a button on the ribbon at the top of the software, you are in effect running a macro made by Microsoft. You can make your own macros too, which is exactly what cyber criminals do. And that's why you shouldn't enable macros in a document when you're not sure of the source or its integrity. The Locky ransomware took full advantage of this feature to devastating effect. Now we know how ransomware is distributed, let's have a quick look at the anatomy of an attack in a bit more detail. The two diagrams here illustrate how a typical ransomware infection occurs. In the first, the user has clicked an email that has installed a malicious payload. That payload gives the hacker the ability to communicate with the infected computer from the cloud. This base of operations is often called the command and control center, and it is from here that the hacker will launch further attacks. The C2 structure will eventually be used by the hacker to send an encryption key which scrambles your files and makes them inaccessible. Our second diagram is very similar. The user clicks on a bad link, is redirected to a website and scanned. If the system is vulnerable, a backdoor is established on the machine from which the hacker can control it using the C2 infrastructure. Just be aware that once a C2 has been established, the hacker can commit other attacks before deploying ransomware. When the ransomware is deployed, it will seek to encrypt or destroy your backup first, and then it will prioritize files with the most recent access dates, usually because these files are the most critical to business operations. So, are we doomed? Ransomware can be polymorphic in nature. It's a bit like the terrorist who keeps changing their clothes to avoid detection. The virus code changes, so it's hard to detect that it's actually on your system. Alternatively, the ransomware program is encrypted, so your antivirus doesn't really know what it's looking at. Furthermore, capable hackers will make any communication with the C2 platform look as legitimate as possible. However, it's not all doom and gloom. We can mitigate the chances of getting ransomware by developing a collection of different strategies that give us defense in depth. Think of this as multiple concentric barriers to your prized data. If one barrier falls, another takes its place to catch the attack. First and foremost, develop company policies that will protect your network, then train users to abide by them, such as how to create strong passwords, which you must keep confidential, and why it is important to implement 2FA. In other words, you log on with a password and perhaps a PIN that is sent to your mobile phone. There might be rules on the proper procedures for getting a password reset, on using only approved USB thumb drives, or on using company-sanctioned software to exchange documents rather than email attachments which can make an organization vulnerable, on the dangers of macro-enabled documents, on using the company internet to visit unauthorized sites, remember Malvertising, or downloading materials, on dealing with warning messages generated by antivirus products or a firewall if you have one, on updating computers so that they are not vulnerable when they are scanned, on leaving computers unattended and at risk, on escorting visitors around the site and dealing with unfamiliar personnel when you bump into them, on reporting security incidents quickly but without fear of reprisal. You are the victim, not the criminal. At the same time, any cyber awareness program must be engaging, otherwise people won't listen or change their behavior. For example, you could run a competition, spot the 10 telltale signs that this is a phishing email, or who can write the most cunning and humorous phishing email, answers on a Word document too. Again, video clips on dumpster diving, shoulder surfing and piggybacking can be both scary and yet entirely fascinating at the same time. Just make sure that your training is tailored to your audience. For ransomware, for example, the IT department might need something on how to contain, mitigate, and then sanitize systems, or how to collect valuable evidence en route. Senior leaders, on the other hand, need to understand how to develop an incident response plan or a business continuity plan to keep the show on the road when ransomware hits. Don't worry, however, we have videos on all these topics. You should also enforce the principle of least privilege to prevent ransomware. Privileged credentials allow a user to set up user accounts, connect to different systems, install software, disable protection such as antivirus, and play around with audit logs so you have no idea who did what and when. Far too many IT staff have full administrative privileges when further granularity is possible. Far too administrators log on with elevated privileges even when they're performing tasks that do not require them. And far too many administrators don't enable two-factor authentication on services that facilitate privileged commands like RDP. Far too many organizations do not remove access rights when an employee leaves, or even when they acquire new responsibilities and no longer require the same privileges as they did before. So there must be some mechanism in place to check that these things are happening. All users must only have the privileges they absolutely need to perform an assigned work task and no more. Otherwise, this dramatically increases the risk of a compromised account being used to install ransomware and wreak havoc. Patching is also critically important. Bugs and security vulnerabilities are routinely discovered in operating systems and software. Different vendors write security patches to fix these vulnerabilities. Every organization needs to patch, and I don't just mean your workstations and your servers either. Routers, switches, firewalls, printers, everything and anything with an operating system needs patching because they are all weak points that will allow the attacker to get a foothold in your network and spread ransomware. Ideally, you should 1. Evaluate patches. Is it required? Is it relevant? 2. Test patches. Does it cause unwanted side effects? Will the system no longer reboot? 3. Get approval so that the system owner has authorized the change. 4. Implement the patch, making sure you record what, when, and how. 5. Verify that the patch has been deployed. Many automatic deployment tools include the ability to audit systems and check patches have taken effect. Whilst we're on the subject, be very, very wary of using deprecated software on your network. That's one of the reasons why you should have a list of all the software that's installed on your systems and when they were installed. You should also scan systems. A vulnerability scanner, many of which are free and open source, will detect vulnerable systems and help you fix them. They can detect unpatched devices, weak passwords, default accounts, and they generate informative reports. The type of data you collect and process, together with how much you rely on your systems, should determine the frequency of performing such audits and which vulnerabilities you should address first. It is also important to create natural choke points in your network by either physically or logically segmenting it. This might mean that the finance department is on a different network to human resources, who are on a completely different network to manufacturing, who might be on a completely different network to the network administrators. Segmentation is possible using firewalls, routers, switches, or by employing a concept called software-defined networking. Whatever you do, segmentation stops a hacker from bunny hopping across your systems and causing havoc. It also increases the chances that malicious activity will be detected at each endpoint, and crucially for us, it prevents ransomware from becoming a widespread problem. In the same way that your network is segmented, your worksite or facility should also be divided into zones with different checkpoints and choke points depending on how important and sensitive that area is. So we could be looking at gates, fences, cipher locks, CCTV, turnstiles, man traps, manned reception points, screened areas, rules on how to handle visitors whilst on site. Remember, we are trying to stop unauthorized access to our systems and devices such as USB drives being plugged into our network. Antivirus software can be critical if you want to stop ransomware attacks. They can be signature-based, which just means it checks incoming data against a rulebook of malicious code. This is a pretty good solution, but if I encrypt a malicious piece of software, the antivirus software won't always know what it's looking at, and I might be able to slip past. Secondly, it takes time for the antivirus company to study new ransomware threats and add them to the rulebook. So if you have a better budget, you might consider a heuristic antivirus package. This examines the behavior of software to see if something dodgy is occurring on your network, such as an unexpected amendment to operating system files. Usually, these suspicious files are quarantined and sent to a malware analysis tool for further inspection. Heuristic packages can be awesome, but they do tend to generate a lot of errors when first introduced. Another type of security package alerts an administrator when certain important files are changed. The files are hashed, which just means an algorithm looks at them and produces a string of gobbledygook. Now, if someone plays with the file, the hash or the gobbledygook looks completely different, and then you instantly know that something untoward is happening. Tripwire is a very good example of this type of software that can warn you when changes are taking place. Generally speaking, it's always good to buy a quality antivirus product and make sure that it automatically scans USB, checks email, and cannot be turned off without notifying you. Finally, there are also specialized commercial products that can be brought to specifically stop ransomware. These can be installed on all your key devices. They use behavioral analysis and machine learning to stop threats and offer multi-point protection on your endpoints, your servers, and your email systems. They can stop file modification and take real-time backups of critical files and store them securely. An intrusion detection system, or IDS as they are known for short, is also a good solution to prevent attacks. An IDS monitors events happening on your network and alerts you via texts, emails, or pop-ups if it has identified malicious activity. A good example of a free IDS is Snort. An intrusion prevention system, or IPS, is similar but can take corrective action to disable the threat rather than just set alarm bells ringing. An IDS and IPS system use a database of known threats to stop an attack, or they use behavioral-based detection systems. An IDS can be host-based or network-based. A host-based IDS just means that protection is deployed on each and every computer and shows what the attacker has been doing on that particular device. For example, it can track which files they've changed. It can determine whether the machine is reaching out to a command and control server. It can scan for malicious code. However, they're quite hard to manage if you have lots of machines, and they can't detect attacks on other systems, only the machines they're installed on. They also consume a significant amount of system resources. A network-based IDS, on the other hand, uses sensors at key points on the network to collect data and send that information to a central console. They are hard to discover and disable, they have minimal impact on network performance, and they can detect the initiation of an attack or that an ongoing attack is taking place. They just can't tell you if the attack has worked. For that, you need the host-based IDS. In terms of email security, it is always prudent to block emails based on keywords. These words are entered on the company email server or in a third-party spam filter. You should also try and block emails that come from specific IP addresses if you know they are banned. You should disable attachments that are executable file types, which can hide all sorts of nasty malware. Incidentally, file types ending with M usually contain a macro, which we talked about earlier on. You should also block image file types and archive or compressed file types. Compressed folders protected with a password are often used to trick antivirus software from scanning the encrypted contents. It's also wise to prevent email harvesting so hackers can't get hold of your email address in the first place. You can do this by using contact us forms on your website to hide your email address, or embed your email into an image on your website. Finally, I would also recommend the use of DMARC. Now, DMARC actually consists of two important technologies. Number one, SPF. If someone sends an email claiming to be from your company, the recipient can check if it was actually sent from one of your servers. Number two, DKIM. Now, DKIM lets you sign an email, and this signature can prove that the email address it came from was not fate. DMARC will protect your business partners and your stakeholders, but it only works if we all start to do it. We should also harden our computer software and equipment. One useful tip is to check carefully the configuration settings of a browser. Usually there are advanced settings that can block harmful downloads, stop pop-ups, and avoid harmful redirects. Most browsers come with useful add-ons too, which can increase the level of security, such as HTTPS everywhere. But be sure to check that the add-on is reputable and understand any side effects that it may cause. For system administrators, it's also important to create an application whitelist using App Locker. This determines what software can run on your network. Rules can be customized for different users or different groups. You can easily test if the rules work. You can export the rules to XML so you have a template that can be used elsewhere on your network. System administrators will also need to disable or at least monitor the use of scripting tools that can be used across a network. Windows Script Host and PowerShell in particular have me a bit worried. Hackers will use these tools to attack other machines once they're in your network, and we call this living off a LAN because these tools don't usually set alarm bells ringing. We should also deploy DNS and web filtering. Okay, so what's that? Well, wouldn't it be awesome if we had some sort of filter that detects and prevents malicious connections, especially if one of our computers was trying to reach out and connect to a command and control center to download encryption keys? Well, you can. In a matter of minutes, you can redirect all your traffic through a cloud provider who will use cutting-edge technology to blacklist millions of bad websites and servers and ensure your staff are surfing the net appropriately. Nor does it require hardware and software. You just literally redirect your traffic through the provider's gateway. Unfortunately, this is not enough to stop ransomware. Why? Because cybercriminals set up command and control servers at a drop of a hat, and it takes time for them to be added to blacklists. If you are sat there thinking that all of this sounds a bit much, you can combine many of these technologies into one unified threat management solution. UTMs can be purchased and set up on your network for a fee and then a subscription. UTMs combines and simplifies system protection and management. They include anti-spam filters, antivirus software, DNS filtering, IDS technologies and firewalls, which we haven't really talked about. They can even employ DLP technology, which is a great way of preventing your sensitive data leaving your network accidentally or even maliciously. UTMs usually come with a sandbox. This is just a safe holding area to test suspicious files or attachments before letting them onto your network. UTMs provide backup protection of critical systems, will automatically update themselves and allow you to manage everything from a single console or interface. Because they are cloud-based, you're usually getting a considered response to a vast collection of threat intel, and they can be very, very effective. Remember, however, you don't need to spend a lot of money to protect yourself from ransomware. Think about that end user training. And finally, we get to backup. Every organization should develop a comprehensive backup plan. This involves determining what must be backed up, obviously anything critical for daily operations, where backups must be stored, how backups will be decoupled when not required. And what I mean by that is if your network is constantly connected to your backup, then if your network becomes infected by ransomware, then so will your backup. This turns a bad situation into an unimaginable nightmare. So ideally, you should decouple your backup when not in use. You should also consider how many copies you should keep. I recommend at least 2 copies. And then consider how the backups will take place. You can make incremental backups, which are quicker to make because you're actually only backing up files that have recently changed. But by the same token, they are slower to restore because you're looking at files spread across several different backups. A full backup, however, is slower to perform on a regular basis, but very quick to load up. So how quickly you need to get the backups up and running will depend on the implementation that you go for. Finally, you should consider how backups will be tested to ensure integrity and restoration capabilities. Who will oversee and manage the backup process? Responding to ransomware means following tried and tested incident response procedures. If you have no incident response plan, never mind having tested one, see our cybersecurity incident response plan and our video on applied incident response. Incident response is usually broken down into 4 key stages. So let's have a quick look at each so you know what you should be doing when you're attacked. Stage 1 is preparation. It includes all the advice in this presentation about creating defense in depth, training, least privilege, physical security, email filtering, patching, using antivirus or advanced ransomware protection, IDS and IPS systems. This stage is also about having plans and documentation in place to help you deal with a ransomware attack, such as who is in charge of the incident, how will you communicate the incident across different parties, how will we classify the severity of the attack, what are our agreed procedures to keep the show on the road. Again, see our other resources if this is all a bit alien. If you are a network manager, you have to know how your network is configured and what normal network behavior looks like. Otherwise, you will be very hard pressed to find anomalous activities and insidious alterations. Detection. 9 times out of 10, you will know that you've been hit as soon as you fire up a computer and see a big splash screen or message detailing how to pay a ransom to decrypt your files. Alternatively, you might just come across some encrypted files on your network and then payment instructions in every folder. Just make sure that staff report a ransomware attack as quickly as possible because time is of the essence. Analysis and containment. Working out what you have been hit with may involve uploading an infected sample to No More Ransom or ID ransomware. You should also try and determine the scope of infection in this stage by looking at mapped drives and folders, shared storage devices, and even connected online accounts, as some ransomware variants can spread to the cloud. You should try to find out how the initial infection was caused. As we have already noted, this is usually because of a phishing email, malvertising, an infected USB, or poor patch management of some public-facing server. Your antivirus, firewall, DNS, IDS, Windows event logs are your go-to sources for finding this information out. Keep an eye out for rogue accounts and any amendments made to auto-start configurations too. Police cyber teams can help you identify the source of an attack, which is why it's a good idea to call them and report problems to Action Fraud. Your initial investigations will give you ideas about how to contain the problem. Containment usually means restricting internet connection to critical devices, isolating infected systems from the network, maybe by pulling cables or disconnecting the wireless, taking shared drives offline, especially the backup, which you should immediately scan. You might have to purge the mail server or block access to malicious websites to contain the problem. During this stage, you might also start to document actions that the organization is taking. Now, this sounds ludicrous, but writing down what you're doing helps organize your thoughts and take the right steps. And it's also vital for capturing evidence for insurance purposes or for criminal proceedings that may occur later on. Eradication is our next step, and eradication solutions differ For example, you might need to flatten and rebuild or run systems in safe mode to roll back to a previous state. It might involve running an updated antivirus package or even a completely different antivirus package from what you used to use, just to make sure that your house is clean. You might need to remove outdated applications or services which facilitated the infection in the first place. Recovery solutions, which is our next stage, can also vary considerably. Screen locker ransomware is less of a problem and can be removed by restarting in safe mode, running anti-malware, and then something like Trend Micro Screen Unlocker. Solutions are harder for other ransomware types. However, I have known some network teams to try and use decryptors and free software for recovering deleted files. If you're going to do that, your favorite search engine is your best friend here. Just type best decryptor tool for ransomware and best software tool to recover deleted files. Two reputable sites to get you going include No More Ransom and KnowBe4. You should only restore from a backup if you are very confident that the backup and the device you're connecting it to are clean. After that, start connecting devices in order to download, install and update the operating system and all your other software. Reconnect your network and monitor network traffic, running antivirus scans periodically to identify if the infection is still there. Hopefully, this is starting to highlight the importance of practicing different incident response scenarios. This can be done through tabletop exercising, where you pretend that the company is under a ransomware attack. These exercises are extremely effective and it will help the network team because they'll have a much better idea of where to look for problems and what actions will have to be taken and in what order. They will start to develop checklists that they can use in a real crisis, which is super important when you're stressed and in shock. It's not just the network team that need to put their thinking caps on either. SLT have to figure out how to keep the show on the road when your IT systems go down. That, however, is the topic of another video tutorial.